Secretary, but maybe he'd just been waiting all these years for the British to come back. But, Secretary Kerry, you owed me one for that, but you have repaid your debt tonight. But on a serious note, it seems to me that when the world has what appears an insurmountable problem, the world calls on John Kerry. He exemplifies the best of American values. He exemplifies the best of American influence and the best of humility in confronting the things we need to confront, regardless of fear of failure or loss of face. Secretary Kerry, we are truly honored to have you with us. Welcome to the CBI.
John, thank you very, very much. You were crazy to go to New Hampshire, but that's all right. But I'm glad you did. I mean, you occupied that guy for long enough for me to win New Hampshire. So I thank you for that. What a great crowd here tonight. Thank you very much, Tony, for that introduction. My mother and my father would have believed every word of it. My kids would be rolling their eyes right now. But anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, I promise not to discuss tonight the latest controversy between Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney. But I really did appreciate Tony's comments, right on target, probably stole much of what I should be saying. But let me begin. I want to share with you, I was thinking, listening to his introduction, and by the way, Kwasi, thank you. Nice to see you here. Secretary Kwarteng and Secretary Forbes. My middle name is Forbes, ladies and gentlemen. I have someone hiding here that I'm related to, if it isn't Secretary Forbes. I was listening to his introduction because he's a very eloquent fellow and he was going on quite considerably beyond. You know, I don't want to. I was at a political event. This is not a political event, but a huge crowd like this one. And somebody got up and they were going on and on making an introduction, and you were not, but they were. And fellow stood up afterwards when he finally got up to the podium and he said, "My God, I could have listened to you all night." And for a moment, I thought I was going to. So, and I am delighted to be here with all of you, and I really mean that. As a former United States Senator, I'm delighted to be invited anywhere, folks. So this is a pleasure, especially today, may I say. There's the great story of introductions, if I can play for a moment. William Howard Taft, back in the early 1900s, President of the United States, was a man of just enormous girth. And he was at this huge dinner where the podium, table extended forever on both sides, and he was sitting down a ways. And back in those days, of course, your chance in politics was when you could give an introduction with the president there. We had this moment. So this United States Senator, true story, from New York, Chauncey Depew, was invited to give the introduction, and he just was going to make the most of his moment. So William Howard Taft is the closest he can get to the table is like this. And Chauncey's waxing eloquent. He's getting stronger and stronger with every breath. And he looks down at the other table. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen, what an honor tonight. We have the President of the United States here with us. Just look at him, sitting there, pregnant, with hope, pregnant with courage." And it goes on. So finally he says, "I give you the President of the United States." And Taft gets up. He starts walking up, rubbing his tummy. And he says, gets the podium, "Pregnant, eh? Well, I have news for you. If it's to be a girl, we will call her Hope. And if it is a boy, we will call him Courage. But if, as I suspect, it is merely gas, we will call it Chauncey Depew." Very much. Anyway, funny things do happen in politics. Thank you to the Weir Group. Thank you so much for putting this together. May you have another 150 years, and we are honored by that, as well as McKinsey and Vodafone. I think they're up here somewhere in back of me. And I want to thank Glasgow for extraordinary hospitality. Everybody is so polite and so welcoming, and I think it really is building up to something very, very special in these next 10 days. My voice a little hoarse tonight. I've been negotiating part of the day and speaking at various things, and left our friends from China just a little while ago, who we are working with to try to see if we can find the community global spirit that is needed at this moment in our lives. And I want to share that with you a little bit. I was there in 1988 when Jim Hansen testified to the United States Senate. And he told us climate change is here and it's happening. And Al Gore and I and a group of senators, then Young Turks, became engaged in that issue very deeply. We went to Rio in 1992. George Herbert Walker Bush, President of the United States, went too. Bipartisan delegation. And we were committed to getting something done, and we did. We created the Voluntary Framework Convention, which has led to 26 COPs. And from the 1st to the 26th, I've been involved in many of them, most of them, not all. But I was most recently in Copenhagen and Paris, and now here. Copenhagen failed. Paris did not. And one of the things we were able to do, President Obama had appointed me to be Secretary of State. I went and met with President Xi in China, and we brought the Chinese on board. It was a different attitude and dynamic between us at that moment in time. But we succeeded in cooperating, working together, and for a year we set targets. And we went to Paris, and that enabled 195 countries to come together and sign on to a better future. Regrettably, and I said this at the time, that none of us were leaving Paris having guaranteed to our citizens that we were going to hold the Earth's temperature to well below 2 degrees, let alone 1.5. We knew we weren't, but we weren't faking it. What we knew we were doing was bringing 195 countries together to galvanize action and to send a message to you, to the private sector, that 195 countries are going to create a market. They're going to do something different. And for the first year, it worked. $358 billion went to alternative, renewable, sustainable energy. And then the next year, 358 or so, same thing. And then along came a different President of the United States, different from anything we've ever had before. And hopefully, no, I won't go there. But I have to stay in my lane. I'm not allowed to do politics. But he stopped the money from flowing, pulled out of the agreement. But I'm proud to tell you that on the day after he pulled out of the agreement, I stood up in New York with Governor Cuomo and Governor Jay Inslee of Washington and Governor Jerry Brown of California, and we announced that Donald Trump may be pulling out of the agreement, but the American people are staying in. And we did. And over the last years, the mayors and the governors and others have kept America moving forward, folks. So we're not quite as bad as you think we are. In fact, 75% of the new electricity we've brought online in the last few years have come from renewable energy in the United States. And now, 90% of the new electricity coming online is coming from renewables around the world. So here we are in Glasgow. It's impossible to overstate the degree to which this moment is indeed important. If everybody did what they said they were going to do in Paris, and were not, the Earth's temperature would still rise over 3 degrees, maybe up to 4 degrees. And we all understand what a beyond catastrophe that would be. Everything that's happening today is happening at 1.1 to 1.2 degrees of warming, 0.5 of which comes from methane, which is really something we can deal with, which is why we started a methane pledge here. And 105 countries have signed up to it. We only announced this pledge in New York in September. And yet already people are realizing that methane, 20 to 80 times more dangerous, more destructive than CO2, also has to be dealt with. And if we deal with it, methane alone is responsible for 0.5 degrees centigrade of the rise of temperature, almost half of where we are today. So if we can stop the leakage of pipes, if we can cap old mines and wells, if we can stop flaring in various countries where they drill for gas, we will make enormous difference in where we are today. So let me just share with you a few observations about the road that we're on. After Paris, evident as it was that we had this extraordinary gap staring us in the face for the future, we began to view Glasgow as the moment. And when President Biden appointed me as Special Envoy, we began an effort with an extraordinary group of people. I must tell you, I have an incredible team. I led our negotiations in Paris, and I brought back the very people who were involved in all of that with their experience. And people were ready and did quickly leave great private sector jobs. The head of the Hewlett Foundation, others came to work. And now we are involved in this critical next 10 days where genuinely it is the last best hope, as I've said many times, to get us on course. Will we, in leaving Glasgow, no matter what happens, even in the best circumstances, we still will have a gap here. We have to be honest about it. But already, because of the work we've been doing in the last 9 months with Mexico, with Brazil, with South Africa, with Saudi Arabia, with Indonesia and others, all of them have come to the table now and raised their game, dependent on us, developed nations, to help them make the transition, which is fair. 20 countries, folks, are the equivalent, produce 80% of all the emissions. So it's no wonder that vulnerable nations and less developed nations are angry and frustrated and looking for help. And it is appropriate that we, the developed world, step up and make a difference. And we can, no question about it. And I'll tell you, extraordinary things are happening now. I see it everywhere. But last week, the G20, I mean, I could never have imagined when I started this job that the G20, given, if you know, the complicated makeup that we have there, would actually sign on to saying no more international external funding of coal anywhere in the world. And they all signed on. But more than that, in Paris, we agreed to reduce the temperature by well below 2 degrees, which people often forget. I don't know what well below is to you, but to me it's not 1.9 or 1.8 or 1.7. Well below is well below. And pretty close to 1.5, but 1.5 was actually an afterthought in Paris. It came about because the island states and the vulnerable nations felt they hadn't really been adequately listened to, and that they still faced extinction. So we set about to address it with the 1.5, but it was language that was different. It was strive to achieve the 1.5. Then in 2018, the IPCC scientists came out and told us, you guys aren't getting the job done. You are heading towards absolute disaster and catastrophe, and you will have a planet that is uninhabitable that you cannot begin to think about the consequences. Already we have millions of people moving around looking for alternative places to live. But what would happen at 2+ and 3 degrees is beyond comprehension. If you think Europe was changed by the migration that occurred during the Syria war while Turkey was sort of turning the dial up and people were pushed out to go to Europe, think of how that changed the politics of the world. Not to mention the politics of a Brexit. I mean, the fact is that we will see changes that we just don't even know how to fundamentally cope with when disease spreads even more easily, and COVID is our warning on that, or when we see what happens to nations with the fires and the floods and the mudslides and the drought, water drying up now in the western part of the United States, Hoover Dam lower than it's been since 1937. All around the world, the Himalayas, I talked to the Pakistani Prime Minister the other day, their capacity for hydro has been diminished because the glaciers are diminished and this flow of water, of melted water in the spring is diminished. I mean, you can run through the, look, we had people dying in their basements in New York in a storm last summer. We had 150 people died and froze to death in Texas because of the implications of lack of proper infrastructure and development for adaptation and resilience purposes. This will be the challenge. And here's the deal. No government in the world has enough money to effect this transition. The UN tells us that this transition already has a finance gap of somewhere between $2.6 and $4.6 trillion a year. Trillion. So billions don't cut it. We need the trillions. And just yesterday, thanks to the efforts of a lot of people who have been working together, it was announced that Asset Managers Coalition, Asset Owners Coalition, Bank Coalition, all have come together here in Glasgow to announce that $130 trillion is poised and ready to be invested in this transition. But, my friends, that's not giveaway money. That's not concessionary money, concessional money. That is investment money. And so our job, and this is what we've been working on, Prime Minister Modi has said, I'm going to deploy 450 gigawatts of renewable energy in the next 10 years. And they're very dependent on coal, obviously. Well, they could do that, but they need help. They need the finance. They need the technology. So we've agreed to partner with them, together with UAE and other countries. And we're going to bring the technology to the table. We've appointed a full-time person to be on the ground in India, hold hands, walk them into those deals, bring that money to the table and say, here's the deal. They're ready to deploy. And we're going to get the government to help facilitate the acceleration of that deployment. That's how we're going to do this, folks. No automatic pilot here. Everybody is going to have to be part of this transition. But business, more than anybody, is the one entity that we really need at the table this time that can make the difference. Why? Because you are those trillions of dollars. You are the marketplace. You are the job creators. You're the folks who can bring to the table the focused effort to create the jobs of the future and transition those markets. Just today, this afternoon, we announced the First Movers Coalition. It's a group of companies that have come together, not small companies, Amazon, Lafarge Holcim, biggest cement dealer in the world. They're at the table for the first movers. They're telling people that we're going to make X amount of green cement and we'll take the premium on it, and you now have a marketplace where you can buy it. And so people are buying it. And guess what they found when they buy it? It's better cement than any cement that's ever been made. And people are buying it because it's better cement. Amazon's at the table. Amazon just joined us yesterday. Imagine the impact of Amazon saying, we're going to make sure that our shipping is carbon-free, and imagine what happens in fuel. We had Bank of America join. Bank of America is going to help translate sustainable aviation fuels and make sure that the people who fly or do anything for them are only flying where there is sustainable energy fuel. This is what changes things. It creates a new market. opens up the future. And that's going to happen all over the world, I believe. And Tony's absolutely correct in the comments he made. There is an energy. Every COP I've been to in history has never had the feel of what I feel here in Glasgow today. New energy, new urgency, a new sense of possibility. And we've never had as much corporate presence and commitment as we have today, my friends, thanks to you. So we're going to, I believe, be able to raise ambition beyond anything that we imagined. Already we have finance that is very significant. Japan made a commitment the day before yesterday that put $10 billion into the mitigation effort, but $2 billion of it a year over 5 years. That $2 billion now, if it's used as a guarantee, allows us to leverage the multi-development banks. So the World Bank will accept that. The OECD accepts that. So that leverages about $8 billion of investment. That means that for 2022, we now have the full $100 billion that we wanted to have, and $100 billion going forward. So we take that issue off the table, and it changes the dynamics. So my friends, you've seen a revolution here before in this community. You're now leading, as Tony said, the largest economic transformation in the world. And I just think that, even if you look at what BT, that's here in the room, is racing ahead and advancing their net zero target from 2045 to 2030 for company emissions and 2040 for their entire supply chain. Ørsted, world's largest developer of offshore wind, is going net zero by 2025. In fact, they just became the first energy company in history to have a net zero commitment validated by the Science Based Targets Initiative. The Scotch Whisky Association is conserving and restoring peatland and ensuring that all new packaging is reusable or compostable and will go net zero by 2040. So, my friends, it turns out that green Scotch is even better than Scotch. And we've also seen dozens of announcements here at COP26 alongside private industry. I just want to highlight a second one. By the way, in the business, the forward-leaning businesses, I talked about the First Movers Coalition. We also have Bill Gates, obviously Jeff Bezos with Amazon, and others who are going to create this multi-trillion-dollar new industry signal. And retailers who are pledged now to use zero-carbon shipping for their merchandise to accelerate the production of clean ships and fuels. Companies that move to stand that benefit the most, obviously. And to help accelerate this, we also launched the Clean Energy Demand Initiative alongside McDonald's, Unilever, Google, LinkedIn, Salesforce. These are all companies committed to going 100% renewable, and they're setting specific investment goals in countries around the world. So we're working with governments to ensure that they can deploy those investments, and already more than 70 companies have demonstrated interest in investing $100 billion in 14 countries. So, my friends, I worked with the 6 largest banks in America: Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, State Street, Wells Fargo, and they all committed and announced publicly that over the next 10 years they will invest $4.16 trillion in this transition. So this is real. It really is real. And we can overcome the gap. No one ever said, or that we could, come here to Glasgow and just make an announcement and this problem's going away and it's cured. This is always going to be tough. But it's doable. And what we know is that with 65% of global GDP already committed to legitimate 1.5 degrees, we could actually get there if we get the other nations next year, the year after. The scientists didn't say you have 1 year to get it done. They said you have 12 years in 2018, 9 years now, within which we make the decisions and implement on them to avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis. That's what they said. So I think we're going to leave here. I don't want to, it's always dangerous to get a little up, too far over your skis. But I believe that we're on the brink of just an inflection moment, a huge moment in history. And what's amazing about it is, think about this. I've thought about the thousands of votes I cast as a United States Senator over 28 years. Sometimes you really agonize over a vote. It's tough. How's it going to cost me politically? What's going to happen? Or what's the balance between what you're doing for your citizens and what happens to the larger community? Is this a selfish decision? All those decisions. This is a no-brainer. I've never seen a decision where it's all upside and the downside is manageable, as it is. We have particulates running around the world from coal that cost 10 million lives a year. And that will grow. And when you combine it with methane, it's just plain old pure pollution, folks. And we all fought that. You fought it here in Scotland, Great Britain, and we fought it in New York and Los Angeles and in the United States so we could see the blue sky again. We know how to do these things. And it's fitting that we're gathering here in Glasgow, the so-called workshop of the empire. Glasgow is the city that made the first industrial revolution. We know a lot about that in Massachusetts with Lowell and Lawrence and New Bedford and a bunch of communities that were grown up around mills and modeled on what was happening here. In Glasgow, I believe it's lying along the riverbanks next to the COP26 gathering. 200 years ago, giant ships were docked there. Steam engines rolled off the assembly lines. Ironworks and textile mills sent products from these streets to markets around the globe. And indeed, the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce is the oldest in the English-speaking world, founded in 1783, to help solidify and expand trade with the fledgling United States of America. That progress obviously eventually slowed. And factories were shuttered, and planes replaced the ships. And markets shifted, and the businesses that led that transition, the ones that led it, flourished. And those that did not often perished. So today, my friends, we see a similar transition in the offing. The companies in this room are showing us how to approach it by seizing the opportunity and investing in it and blazing a trail for others to follow. We can do this. Just today, we received a notice from Fatih Birol, the leader of the International Energy Agency, who's done great work in helping us think this through. But today he said that the current level of NDCs that have been submitted by their analysis amount to keeping the Earth's temperature, if they are fully complied with and executed, keeps the Earth temperature at 1.8 degrees. That's without some of these other countries coming on in full measure. So, my friends, it's a question of human beings making decisions. It's not a question of capacity. We have the capacity. We have many of the technologies, and we have many of them currently: direct air capture, storage, long-term storage, green hydrogen. There's so many different things happening out there that money is now beginning to move to with venture capital and even our national laboratories. I have no doubt we will get to a net zero, low-carbon economy. The question is, will we get there in time? So thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for what you're going to do. And best I can say to you right now is Slendra.